we have up to 12:30 about something to talk about financial management cycles. Did it say? Yes, financial management cycles. Okay, I think what I would like to do with you is give you some information on what's going on in reality, whatever that may mean. That's an epistemological problem. That's an issue of how do you study financial management cycles, of course. How do you do this in a comparative way? Because that's even a bigger challenge. But first of all, I think it's important for us, and we can have a discussion, a general discussion, even in your countries, your home countries, to see where you are located on a map of shifts, of modernization, of reform, of financial management cycles. That's what I would like to do. You have 3 texts in your documentation, 2 English and 1 French. Who doesn't read French? Okay, well, can start studying it now. I was about to include a German text too, but I thought I should not tease them too much. So you have a text from 1 chapter of a book which Paulette and myself have written on trajectories of reform in general. You have 1 text in French which refers to some particular countries, and then there is 2 chapters from a book edited by Michael Hugje. If you're interested in the book, it's more on Central and Eastern Europe, but the text, the initial 2 chapters are introductory chapters which give you the framework of analysis. So that's the documentation. The transparencies I will show you all are in these texts. So from that point of view, you don't have to twist your hands or your arms to write them. My first question is, whom of you has already touched a budget text? A budget. The budget of your country, the budget of your province, of your city. Who has raised your arms? Are you ashamed of?
I don't have any authority. I touch a lot of budgets.
Okay. Yeah. Who has not? Who has not looked into a budget? Really?
Looked.
Yeah, well, gone through a budget. I know you have seen a title sometimes, but that's not what I'm talking about. Huh? Mm-hmm. Who has already studied a budget of his or her country or whatever? Who has done that? So 80% has not answered. It means you don't understand the question? You don't understand the question, or? It's important, of course, if I talk about shifts in budgets, that you at least know what the budget is and how it looks like. It's a quite scaring thing, and that people in public administration are so ignorant about budget texts. Perhaps it's because numbers are in it, or financial data. Some people are scared of that. So it's an important issue. You disagree?
No.
You may disagree.
Yes, but not in this case.
Okay. Thank you. So it's important. Shall we have a small exercise then to start, just for me to know how you would write a budget? Suppose you have to write a budget of this summer seminar, summer school. How would you write the budget? What? How would you write this? I mean, because I'm talking about evolutions of budget formats and systems, at least I think you should know. I'm trying to create also an optimal level of frustration here. Sufficient for you to say, when I'm back home, I definitely want to see a budget now. You know, you should know it's the spinal cord of a system. The financial system is the spinal cord of a system. If in the United States of America, suddenly because of the discussions between Democrats and Republicans at the House, the Democrats refuse to vote the budget, the country stops. And suddenly people are aware that if the budget is not authorized in Parliament, cannot be implemented, that suddenly obvious services stop to function. It's a spinal cord. You have been talking this morning, I assume, what was the topic of my good friend Guy Peters? Coordination horizon. Okay, did he talk about that? Yes, I thought it was also on policy making. Some of you study policy making. Well, you can't study policies if you don't know the budgets which are linked to these policies. You have to know the format of the policies. You cannot understand the maneuvering room in implementation. Are there any of you studying implementation of policies? Implementation of policies. Well, you cannot understand this fully if you've never seen the budget text, which allows you to maneuver with the budget text to implement. Whom of you is studying organizations? The functioning of organizations. Okay. Well, you cannot understand. Well, yes. In the end, only 5 people will study everything. I invite all of you to raise hands. You cannot understand the functioning of organizations if you don't know the financial functions and the degrees of freedom. We're talking about contract management too, linking a ministry and an agency, or a central government and local government. It's about the financial cycles, which are linked to the policy cycles. So it's indispensable to at least, if ever you go into politics, try to become the Minister of Finance. No, it's a crucial portfolio. It's a crucial portfolio. And it allows you a lot of leverage in all the other portfolios. It's not a coincidence that if we look at reform, modernization, that the key minister of reform in many countries, not in all, there are some exceptions, is of course could be the Prime Minister, but also the Minister of Finance. The Ministry of Finance is a key ministry, not just for financial purposes, for recurrent policy making, for new policies, but also for reform strategies. You will see that in some countries the reform portfolio, even if it's a separate, politically separate, it's subject to finance. There is in many countries it's a separate entity. In Canada you would have the Treasury Board. In the US you would have the Office of Management and Budget. In Finland, any Finnish people here? No? In Finland, the management portfolio is part of the Ministry of Finance. So from all points of view, this is like a crucial issue, and it's almost scaring that, and then we have to do with the disciplines. Who is studying the financial cycles? Who is studying it? Of course, the business administration is studying it. The finance departments and economics faculties. But in public administration as such, it's not always well developed. And I think it's one of the crucial issues to study. So this was a kind of introduction to bring you at a level of optimal frustration and at least to motivate you to go beyond that. But let's come back to a budget text itself. Suppose you have to write a budget for this summer seminar. How would you do that? What would you write on one page? One page. What would you write in it? What should be the answer to which question in the budget text?
What are the needs?
The needs?
How you can financially cover them.
What are the needs and how you can financially cover them? Okay. Shall we write this down? And financially cover, which could you... Yes, okay. Any other suggestions of what you want to have in the budget text?
How much money you have actually?
Yeah. So the money available.
The costs.
cost, and then you could have a cost structure here.
Maybe the
Cost is not the same as expenses. Cost is not the same as expenses, but the cost.
Maybe the cost would be better fit with needs. Every need, how much it costs.
Okay. So it's not just about components, it's also about linking components, as you see. What else?
Number of participants.
Yes.
The number of lecturers.
Number of participants. The number of lecturers. Okay. And that should be linked to the cost, I assume.
How many days?
The number of days. Anything else?
The goals and who's accountable for this program?
Goals, accountability. Anything else?
As in classical budgets, Parliament have.
I'm sorry?
As in classical debate in Parliament about the budget, you have the prescriptions of how to expend the money, or you have the money, you have the needs of the program, and you have the prescription of the authority how to spend the money.
Yes.
Policy, probably the policy.
So it could be, yes, the policy. It's the policy text, the priorities here, which sometimes coincide with the needs, but not necessarily. Anything else?
How many materials you have to?
Who is-
How many materials you have to provide for the students, like this?
Yes. So that's also an element of the cost structure, of course. So the reader, the materials needs to be photocopied.
Well, if they what the cost is always the accommodation, meals.
Yes. Yes. So the logistics. Logistics. So now we are enumerating actually from here on everything which we need as inputs. Anything else? And of course we need the numbers for all of that. And we need to put them, but it needs to be on one page. And it should be logically structured, preferably. We're not going to do that. If we had one day, we could do this exercise. And I would put you in separate groups and say, let's make a budget, and then we will have a vote, a discussion and a vote on who has written the best budget. You see? That could be, but we don't have the time to do that. I can promise you it's not an obvious thing, because immediately you will start discussing other things. So that's the first round, and I invite you to urgently, there are websites available too, so you can look at budget text and see what's in a budget text, because that makes the country function. If the budget is not voted, you won't have accounts, you won't have audits. There is a problem.
Do you think?
Well, I'm exaggerating. There are technical solutions, of course, because then you have 1/12 of the previous year's budget. I know, yes, I know. There are dirty tricks to circumvent things, but that's not the idea, isn't it? That's not the idea. Okay, so that's the first thing I want you to do when you're back home. So that's summer schools is not just we're functioning here; it's also when you're back home to see what the first thing to do when you're back home. So, if we look at the classical policy cycles, can we switch off this light here? Is this a bit better? Mm-hmm. Yes. This is like one way to present policy cycles. And many of the words that you mentioned on the sheet re-emerge here in a slightly different way. But you see, together we are able to write a budget. Together we would be able to do it. You see the needs, Policy objectives, operational objectives, operational meaning quantified. And then you have a cycle. A cycle which you need if you want to realize. It's too low. It's a high-pitched policy. It's a joke. So this cycle is important. If you look at the reform policies of countries, the modernization of countries, what you see is that this cycle is being integrated in many management aspects that are being reformed, especially in the financial cycle. Because if you want to realize these objectives, it means realizing these effects. To realize these effects, you need these outputs. Could be, like in this case, days of training, whatever. Therefore, you need activities which are happening inside the black box. You know, it's the functioning of this hours of whatever. And therefore, you need these resources. And the resources, of course, have to be at the same level as the ambition of the objectives. So you see there are two cycles here. You could read it in this way. To realize these objectives, we need these resources to be able to perform these activities, to be able to deliver these outputs, to be able to generate these effects, which then will fit the operational objectives. That's one. That's the line department's position to negotiate with the budget department. The budget department will have a different focus. Of course, they could have two positions, depending on their ambitions. They could say immediately, this is your envelope. Full stop. This is your envelope. And the rest is your problem. Or they could say, well, we also want to have a say on outputs and effects. And they say, well, we think these outputs are enough. Because after having audited them, we see that you're not so efficient and effective. So we'll punch something out, and that results in these resources. And you get a contradictory debate between the line department and the financial department on the resources. Ultimately, the resource portfolio, the envelope is important, but the rest follows. And now you see that ultimately, if we talk about a financial cycle, starting with, let me show you this slide. It will expand like this. It will expand. I don't want to scare you, so I start with an empty box.
White box.
It's not a black box, it's a white box, yes. You should keep in mind that financial cycles are information systems which want to answer a question. What question does the budget text, the budget information system wants to answer? What?
Efficiency.
What is the basic question? The budget text is an answer to a question.
It depends on who's asking.
Yes, but I'm asking you. I am asking you. What is the purpose of the budget text? Why do you... What you read this, there is information in it which gives an answer to a question. What is the question?
Yeah, the organization.
First you?
How does the state use the tax money?
How does the state use the tax money?
How can this organization realize its function?
Okay. The most systemic way, the most systemic question is... Should I put this what shall we do in the next period? Sorry? You cannot see it. If you sit there, would you be sitting? Why can't you see it?
Because of my eyes.
Ah, okay. How can I solve that?
No.
So the question, so the financial cycle, it's a cycle, and the first, I'm sorry? Is my focus not good? This is better? Oh yeah. I can read it and even understand it now. So the question is, what shall you do in the next period? And you need a parliament to authorize it. Yes, executive, you are allowed to do this next year. So whether in the private sector or in the public sector, the purpose of a budget is to say what you are going to do next year. That's the question. And then the question is, how shall you answer this? How shall you answer this? And the format, the content of a budget text is actually, the purpose of this budget information is to answer this question. And we see the modernization strategy is an evolution of answering this question. That's the key point. And there are ways to answer this. Because if the question is, what shall you do next year? That's what you should be able to read from the budget text. You could answer it in a very simplistic, basic way. And most of your countries will only have this type of answer, this level of answer. So it would not include, I'm talking just about the budget text, it would not have these things. Goals, good heavens, too complicated. Cost, it would not have cost, it would have expenses. Money available, yes. And then it would have things which are here. Not number of participants and number of lectures. It would just say, we have so much money available to pay personnel for operating expenses, for some investments, and that's what we are going to do next year. What are we going to do next year? We are going to expend so much for personnel, so much for operating costs, so much for investments, for transfers. That's what you are going to do. So actually, if you transfer this back to this scheme here, but the most common budget would only say something about resources and not about all the rest. It's called a line item budget. It's called an input budget. It just would say something about we need so much money for personnel, for operating expenses, for investments, for transfers. And you will not be able to read from this text what follows. What shall they do with this personnel? What shall they do with these operating expenses? How many trainings are they going to offer? For what purposes? You won't find it in the budget text. Not even in the accompanying guidelines or in the annexes. So that's a traditional input budget. The other position is, of course, an output formatted budget of a performance oriented budget. That would answer the question, what shall you do in the next period? By saying, we shall expend this amount of money and spend so much money to provide these services for this purpose. So that's a much broader way of answering this question. And we see in all the countries of the OECD, Western countries of the OECD, we see a reform of the financial legislation to move the information systems, the financial information systems, to be able to shift from an answering capacity which is at this level to an answering capacity which is at this level. And the implication is actually shifting from a system which only talks about this to a system, that's the maximum position of course, which covers the whole scheme. And that's of course a tremendous shift I'm not sure if you are aware of the implications to be able to produce such a text in the negotiation stage, in the implementation stage, in the auditing stage. It has a tremendous impact on the organization and the functioning itself of the public sector. But that's like the common denominator. And the budget system is a crucial text in it. If you have questions, you may interrupt me. So it's... That's why I'm inviting you to look at your system. Now, the second element, we talked about, it's a cycle. It's a cycle. How does the cycle look like? So we have the content. That's what we just talked about, the content. And then we have the cycle, the policy cycle. It means procedures and institutions. Institutions that are interacting and using procedures, financial management procedures. And here we see the ex ante stage. It's a classical closed cycle. In reality it doesn't function like that, of course, but that's the ideal type. You will see policy development and internal ex ante evaluation. And also external ex ante evaluation. It means that there is a contradictory debate to shape the policies, to translate them towards organizational functioning. And then, of course, you have the budget decision or the contract decision. That's the budget stage. So the financial translation of this stage is budget. Then, once a decision is taken, you have to implement. And again, there is a separate information system to comment on the implementation. That's here. So if we go to the next question, and that's the accounting system. The accounting system is here. It is a monitoring and control system. A management control system. So again, an accounting system is an information system which answers a question. What question is an accounting system answering? I know accountants are dirty animals, so I know that. But
how we use our resources?
Yes. How is the budget being implemented? How are the resources being used? Being used. That's why you talk about not just cash, expenses, costs. It's in the accounting stage. You want to know what is going on. How is the money being spent? Being spent. That's the minimal position again. So we see in all OECD countries again a shift in the answering capacity of the accounting systems. From cash accounting to double bookkeeping. You see a tremendous shift again. I can promise you, this is like one sentence to say, we are shifting from cash to double bookkeeping. I can promise you it's a nightmare. For many countries it's a nightmare to do that. It's a very simple thing to say, but cash, most of the countries still have cash accounting systems and now are shifting to double bookkeeping, also because of European requirements, new standards. So we are moving to balance sheet, operating expenses, cost systems, and that's all at this stage, to be able to have a more refined capacity to answer the question, what the hell is going on right now? We need to know. So that's a second observation. The financial management cycle is being modernized, not just by shifting from input budgets to output budgets, but also by shifting from cash accounting systems to double bookkeeping systems, including cost accounting systems. So much more refined information systems to be able to have a better control mechanism. That's the ex nunc. The first one was ex ante. This is ex nunc. Hic et nunc. And then we have the Ex post. It's the rear mirror. You look in the mirror. So that's the external ex ante evaluation. That should be ex post. External ex post evaluation and internal ex post evaluation should be ex post here. That's the rear mirror. And in financial terms, it's called audit. Audit. In policy terms, it's evaluation. In financial terms, it's called audit. Audit is again an information system which allows you to answer a question. What is the question? We want to answer by putting together audit systems, procedures, etc. What is the question an audit answers?
Has the money been used correctly according to the budget?
Yes. It's the retrospective question. And now I can come back to my initial system here. So we already have the shift from a kind of minimalistic budget answer capacity to a more maximalistic answering capacity. Budget change. I'll come back to the budget change issue. Accounts answer the question, what is happening during the implementation? The simple answer is, this is the money being spent. The more complex answer is, costs, service volumes and quality are evolving in such a way. So that's the answering capacity of a modernized accounting system. And then we have the audits. What question does the audit answer? What did we do? And how did we do this? How did we do this? What did we do and how did we function? And again, there is an evolution in the answering capacity. We see a tremendous change in OECD countries, Western OECD countries, and establishing internal audit services and in modernizing external audit services and institutions. The supreme audit institutions, probably in all of your countries, is changing dramatically. Internal audit institutions are being established. I can tell you that in the last 5 years, the number of accountants and auditors time in the UK went up like this. The same in Australia. We don't have numbers for other countries. The number of accountants and auditors is exploding because of the need, and then we'll come back later to really trying to explain this, because we are shifting from this column to this column. So the maximum capacity to answer is not just this amount of money has been spent according to rules and regulations, as you said, rightly said. It's kind of financial audit and the regulatory audit, but also adding, have we functioned in an economic and efficient and an effective way? So these terms, it's performance auditing. So you have performance budgets, performance accounting systems, which are the cost accounting systems, and performance audits. Because if you stick at this level here, if you stick at this level of answering capacity, you could say, you could give an answer like, I don't know if we need to open the windows, it's quite, perhaps we shouldn't. You could say, because I need it in my answer, it says, we have thrown out the money out of the window. It's about, what have you? We have spent the money. We have thrown out the money out of the window. But we did it in a correct way. We did it in a correct way. We followed the correct procedures to throw the money out of the window. I mean, that's the financial and the compliance audit. Financial audits and compliance audits only answer, are the numbers correct and have you followed the procedures? Yes, yes. But you throw it out of the window. So what? That's why the new generation of audit, with a tremendous implication for the functioning of systems, adds not just financial audit and compliance audit, but also the performance audit, the value for money audit, however you call it, but it means including economy, efficiency and effectiveness. Yes, please?
About the economy, efficiency and effectiveness. What's your sense? To me, it seems like things are still being done at the economy and maybe some of the efficiency, and the effectiveness, which we would call accountability, isn't really happening as much as it should.
It depends on the countries, of course, and some countries have already a longer tradition than others. So there is the supreme audit institutions. Where did I put my... The supreme audit institutions are evolving, and of course it has to do. The French Cour des Comptes, the German Bundesrechnungshof have another tradition because they are courts, like the word, different from the General Accounting Office, or the National Audit Office, or the Australian National Audit Office. You see, the word audit office is there, or accounting office, which has a similar tradition compared to courts. Rekenhof, Cour des Comptes, Rechnungshof. It's a different strategy. So what you would see is that there is a comparative book on supreme audit institutions and the different role models that are included there, if you're interested in that. But you see, first of all, that even in the most Weberian continental systems, it is evolving in the direction of a performance auditing system. But of course, I think the most advanced ones, like in the UK, but also Australia and New Zealand, of course, are far beyond that, and do not only include economy, but definitely efficiency. Effectiveness is another issue, because it's perhaps, or sometimes politically, a bit sensitive. So effectiveness may be it might be a light version for effectiveness. But efficiency definitely is, in many countries, higher on the agenda and more visible. And of course, the quality and the capacity for the external audit office to be able to perform these depends on the quality of the internal audit quality. If the internal audit systems are weak, if there is no cost accounting system, if there is no performance-based budget, then of course the capacity to generate external audits at the level of efficiency and effectiveness is limited. But it's shifting in this direction, because that's then, and just to make sure we speak about the same terms, this is economy. Economy is an input-input relationship. Efficiency is an input-output relationship, and effectiveness is an input-effect relationship. Cost effectiveness is here too. So you have effectiveness, output effect, and input effects, cost effectiveness. So then we have the whole portfolio of linkages between the basic boxes. Is this an answer? Yeah. Which country are you from? United States. Okay. So the General Accounting Office, of course, is a special case in their way they proceed. It's a well-staffed organization with a lot of resources and with a special strategy also for its own research. So you wouldn't find this in European. That model you would not find in the European scene. No.
I work in higher education institutions, which tend to formula fund on efficiency. The more students you bring in the door, the more funding you get. And if they don't graduate, it doesn't matter. So they're trying to switch to becoming more of a performance-based effectiveness.
Yes. Well, there is a whole tendency in the US also for the performance-based organizations, and I think one of the first was those paying subventions to students was one of the first, I think, in the US, which was a performance-based PBO. It didn't function properly. I mean, the mechanism, but that's another issue. Yes. So it's important to see this total cycle, and to see the shift in information systems. Because then the last step is, to what extent is the information system of the budget, the accounting system and the audit system, to what extent is it linked? Or are they segregated? To what extent is the modernization of the cycle part of the whole modernization strategy? Where do you start? If you want to modernize the whole cycle, where do you start? Do you start with budget, or with accounts, or with audits? So how can you put pressure from one information system on another? So the linkages are important too. The traditional answer is that they are disconnected. Of course, the advanced answer is that they are connected in their management and in their policy implications. That's the most demanding position, of course. So you could do a reading of the reform strategies of a country by analyzing how countries have organized themselves to shift from this column to this column. And these are ideal types, of course. In the Weberian sense of the word, these are ideal types. So the first question is, have they shifted to this position? Or to what extent have they shifted to this position? Question mark. Question mark. To what extent has a country shifted to a performance-based budget, a cost accounting system, a performance auditing system, and linking these? That's the first question. It's not obvious to answer this. It's not because you have suddenly a legislation saying, now we have performance budget, cost accounting systems, and performance audits. It's a vote. And I can guarantee you, the countries that have changed their legislation, it's a very extraordinary observation. The countries that have changed this legislation to realize this have voted this unanimously. The parliaments have voted this unanimously. It's extraordinary. The GEPRA, the Government Performance and Results Act in the US, but also in Australia, also in Belgium, unanimously. It's amazing. Everybody agrees, otherwise you don't vote yes. Or perhaps there's another hypothesis. They didn't understand what they were voting. It sounds like a joke, but it's really what is happening. Suddenly, once they voted it and implementing it, MPs, especially members of parliament, suddenly realize what they have voted. They get other types of documents, which are disconnected from the previous ones, and they are. We go to countries and we interview also MPs. I was in Canada a couple of months ago. Any Canadians? Oh, okay. Yes. Did you vote?
Did I vote?
Yes.
Oh no, I'm not living in the country at the moment.
Well, you can vote here too. Your vote could have made a difference. Perhaps. So it's quite extraordinary, the frustration level of MPs after the shift. That's a paradox. That's a paradox in political sciences, actually. I'm looking for colleagues to launch a research project on that. Why is it that there is like a common sense to move to this direction? MPs, that's the executive part. The legislative part, it seems that they are agreeing because they voted unanimously. And then suddenly when it's realized, or being realized, they are extremely unhappy about this. Extremely unhappy. Of course, there are two directions of change in the budget system. It's moving towards a performance-based budget, but also an accrual-based budget. An accrual-based budget is using the accounting terms for the budget. So it's a double dimension of evolution, which makes it even more complex. It's as if the executive is saying to Parliament, if you can't explain it, confuse them. So MPs are confused. No, it's a threat, I think, to accountability mechanisms. Because you should know that the whole financial cycle has, of course, an element of, it has a macro element of macroeconomics. You need to have the stability, the macro stability in a country. Think of the stability pact of the euro. So macroeconomically, the budget is a crucial instrument to equalize economies. Second, it has an allocation function. That's a political decision. So much money for culture, so much for education. That's allocating resources in a system, sometimes based on policy designs or needs. It has a management function, because you have to run a shop. Billions of euros, you have to run a shop with a budget, so it has a management function. So it's plus, It's the macro function, allocation function, management function. And all of that, of course, should be in the context of accountability. Accountability. The government is accountable to the Parliament for the implementation of the budget. And ultimately to the people, of course, the citizens, outside there, somewhere. So these are the four aspects you have to look at. Macro function, allocation function, management function, and then of course the accountability mechanism. You have to be accountable for the macro, the allocation and the management of your resources. And therefore you need these financial systems here. What we see is that this accountability issue, which is actually one of the key elements of focus of the reform processes, that this accountability perhaps becomes dysfunctional if ultimately you realize that it seems not to work. There is a problem. There's a problem of implementing these systems and accelerating, facilitating the communication and the accountability mechanisms. Even if some countries have tried to improve the relationship with Parliament. In Canada, for example, improved reporting to Parliament project, IRPP. Improved reporting to Parliament project. In Sweden, any Swedes here? No? No Scandinavians? Vesta is a Swedish project to facilitate the communication between the government and Parliament, to make sure the budget is well understood, the accounts are clearly understood, and the audits function well. To improve, ultimately, through the accountability, a democratic mechanism of policy making, implementing and evaluating the whole policy cycle, which is a political cycle. Yes?
But isn't this a kind of naive perception that it's hardly an administrative-driven process, the reform, and then they try to educate the politicians and use the information, so how do you work?
That's an excellent remark. I think the basic element, you see, I have not mentioned new public management as a concept yet. I have not mentioned. It's the first time I mention it now. I think new public management is an extremely rational type of reasoning, theory, concept, set of ideas, ideology. And because it's so rational, it's extremely naive in a political context. It's so naive that it's failed. It was predictable that it would fail. So it's already history.
Yeah, but they're still trying to implement it.
Yes, but that's because of the pressure of consultants and others. They have to make a living. So, and some fundamentalist ideology. It's a very fundamental ideology, fundamentalist ideology in the religion of management. So, and we know fundamentalism is never good. So I think it's quite extreme in its positions. And if you look at New Zealand, it's already pulling out of it. So it is new public management is limited in time and in space in the OECD world. Limited in time and space. And it was implicitly pushed almost like a standard for other countries by these countries and by OECD too, of course. The Public Management Secretariat. I know it quite well. I mean, I've written many texts for the OECD. So it's, but it was like an implicit standard, like saying to Germany, "What's wrong with you, Germany? You're not moving to new public management. Are you ill? What's wrong with you?" I mean, that's the implicit standard. It's like a Finnish minister of finance asking me, should we implement the New Zealand model? Finnish minister of finance. I said, of course not. You're not growing kiwis neither. It means there is a political administrative context. So you have to be very selective. I think we have to talk about public management reform in general. Public management reform and new public management is only one limited version, an extremist, fundamentalist, limited in time and space type of public management reform, which is a broader term. If we're talking about this shift here, it was also available in the new public management countries, but it's also available or being realized in other countries, fitting their political administrative system. So the contingencies are important. You could use contingency theory to help describe this evolution and try to understand why do things happen or why don't they happen, and why do they happen at that particular moment in time. That's an important analytical element or remark. And any other questions? Yes?
I want to go back to this before the last. This amount of money has been spent according to rules and regulations. And to the right, this the same. And this also happened with the efficiency and effectiveness. I want to ask, are there rules and regulations who just secure that this amount is spent in effective way and efficient?
If we talk about rules and regulations, it means really the procedure to collect money and to expend money from a classical legal point of view. The authorization issues, the signatures, that's it. Of course, the question is, you have some, it depends on your administrative system, of course. Administrative law, is it administrative law based or not? You could write in the Constitution, all money should be spent efficient and effectively. So I don't know what it could mean in the legal terms. So it's not a legal term, it's a managerial term, of course, which you could use in contracts between a ministry and agency, saying we require the chief executive officer to spend the money to guarantee efficient and effective use. If you look in Australia, you would find this kind of sentences. If you go to Canada too, you would find a statement saying we have taken all the precautions to guarantee an efficient and effective use of the money spent. That kind. And then of course that statement could be audited. You could do that. But then you need sufficient information systems, which the Canadians don't have. They make the declarations, but they are not auditable. So from that point of view, it's a kind of window dressing. It's quite clear. So, and they admit it. In private conversations, they would admit it, of course. So it's this is like a separate type of analysis compared to that. You have the financial compliance, you have the financial audit, you have the compliance audit, and then you have the performance audit. One of the crucial discussions is, do you need a separate performance audit team? Or is it something which is taken also into account by those that normally do the financial or the compliance audit? So the division of labor and the way of organizing supreme audit institutions differs in countries. It differs. It also, the level of analysis differs too. You could have a question which is audited saying, are they in the capacity to work efficient and effective? Yes and no. Or do they work efficient and effective? That's a different way of... are the data they provide on efficiency and effectiveness, are they correct data? That's a totally different way. The General Accounting Office would go into the substance and say, yes, you are efficient, yes, you are this. Whereas more European audit offices would be, or even the West Australian would say, the numbers you use on efficiency and effectiveness are correct. That's a different type of audit, you see. So there's a whole range, even in answering, even if you're in this box, there's a whole range of practices. Any other questions? If we let me just see. Yeah. Let's go back to the budget. The budget. Actually, there are two dimensions in the reform or the modernization. One is the content of the document. What is the pivot, the anchor point? Is it input? Next year we will spend so much money for personnel, operating expenses, transfers. But nobody knows what happens with this personnel. Is it an activity-based budget? Is it an output-based budget? Saying we are going to deliver so much training of that quality with this purpose, and therefore we need these resources. That's a totally different answering structure. Or is it an effect-based budget? You should know that the Australian budget, for example, it's on the website. If you go to the Australian website, go to the Ministry of Finance, you can download the budget. And the structure will be as follows. Per portfolio. Outcomes. I first would say mission. What is the mission of my ministry? In the budget text. In the budget text. So it means it's an existential question. What on heaven am I doing on earth? It's the mission. So, and that explains outcome 2, 3, 4. To realize these outcomes, we need these outputs. Output 1, 2, 3. These outputs have certain features described in indicators. Quantity, quality, timeliness, cost. To be able to realize these outputs, we need these resources, which are the inputs. So we need this amount of money. That's one of the most developed budget structures, I think, in the OECD. And it's a top-down one, from outcomes, outputs, inputs. So that's a crucial way to say what is the anchor point of your document. The authorization, that's perhaps another element you should keep into account for MPs, for members of parliament. What are they authorizing? At what level are they authorizing? In West Australia, it's at the level of outputs. In Canberra, so federal, the Commonwealth level of Australia, it's at the level of outcomes. So that's also a difference, a discussion on what is the optimal level of authorization. In the Belgian context, we are changing our legislation too. They still will authorize at the level of inputs, but put it in this context. That will be an annex of it, but the authorization will be at this level. So there are differences in countries on the level of authorization. That's the first. So that's the first dimension of analysis. The second dimension of analysis, if you look at budget texts, is how is the text changing from T to T plus 1? You are shifting from T to T plus 1. And the question is, how do you proceed to do that? Mette Lyons had her budget of last year, and now she has her budget for this year, and she will, in the coming months, present or prepare her budget for next year. Did she use the same budget for the Leuven conference as she used last year? And said, well, a bit more expensive, plus or minus. So that's the first way to do it. It's incremental change. Incremental change. It means the best budget of next year is the budget of today, and then of course a percentage plus or minus depending on inflation and etc. It's incremental. The other extreme is you start with an empty sheet of paper and say, okay, we have a new summer school next year, let's start from scratch. It's a so-called full zero-based budget. ZBB, zero-based budget. You start from scratch. Each year you start 100% from scratch. Of course, in reality it doesn't happen. That's again an ideal type. You say, let's think we have to start from zero. You never start from zero because you have your personnel already there, for example. It would also be a very demanding system, because from the moment you started to have your budget, you would immediately think of strategies for your next year's budget. So in reality, we have like mixtures, a partial zero-based system. And we see it in reality too. Many countries use a mixture, a blend of incremental and zero-based. They would cut the public sector into 5 parts, or they would, each budget, put it an emphasis on particular components to evaluate the budget itself. And then you see, if you fill this matrix, it's a 3 times 4 matrix, so 12 positions. It will be interesting to see for your country, where would you locate yourself in this matrix here. From A1A till 4C. And there are some historical examples, some clear historical examples. Of course, this is the traditional line item budget with an incremental change. The other extreme would be PPBS, the Planning, Programming, Budgeting System, which collapsed. It didn't function ultimately. It was an effort, it was exported to Europe, it was developed in the US under McNamara, but it collapsed. It could not function for reasons I come back later on. You could have an activity-based budget, you could have a performance-oriented or based budget. So the question is, where are you located in your country? First. Second, normative question, where do you think you should be positioned? Is there an optimal position? Where, suppose you are the Minister of Finance or the Minister of Education or whatever, what type of budget would you like? Third question, if 1 and 2 are different, how do you move from A to B? These are questions which are emerging in reality, but they are also questions emerging in our theories and in our empirical research. to be able to detect how does the system look like, where can we locate it. If there is a new legislation, what is the ambition, where do they want to move to, how do we explain that they want to move to this position, why do they think it will be an improvement, what are the conditions that it will be an improvement. So the contingencies are important here. May I quickly make a tour de table? Some people haven't. I don't know if they can speak for the moment. So I will make the tour de table. So everybody answers the question. Just tell me the name of your country, and then a position between 1A and 4C for a central ministry. A central ministry. Okay? Does everybody understand the question? Of course, it assumes that you have seen the budgets. And I don't know for 80% of you if you have seen a budget. Can you read the matrix? Do you understand the question? Okay? Shall we move? Can you read it? It's so this is an effect formatted. No. Go ahead. It's in your documentation too.
Maybe is it in the paper?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes. Well, then we'll start with you, if I may.
Okay.
So the name of your country, and then what type of budget you have at this time. Where do you locate it? For a central ministry. So we're not talking about local government or an agency, but a central ministry. Okay?
Bulgaria 1A.
Bulgaria 1A. No, just. At least you could say the country already. That's already correct.
I'm trying to decide between Bulgaria and Holland.
Okay. Well, then take both. Both?
I don't know. I like to make things complicated and say it depends on the issue.
No.
So,
that's not an answer.
As a ministry.
Bulgaria, do you agree? 1A.
1A, incremental, traditional. No, I don't think so. I think there are more ad hoc things than you think.
It's what?
There are more ad hoc things, so I would say it's more. In some cases, 1C. Which is
1C.
Yeah, sometimes.
Bulgaria.
Yeah, sometimes coming from scratch.
But then it's a mixed partial. Then it's 1B. Okay. The Netherlands?
I can agree with my colleague.
You from Bulgaria too? Okay, thank you. The Netherlands? Anybody else from the Netherlands? Okay. You may do it in team. Public communication. Do you know VBTB?
Yes.
It's the label of the reform of the budget system in the Netherlands.
Mm-hmm.
So, what is the ambition of VBTB?
Yes, it is that it's more performance oriented. In practice, I don't know if it's always really the case.
The window dressing in the Netherlands is here. Yes.
Yes.
Dutch are excellent in window dressing. In reality, it's more in this direction. Okay, US?
Good. I'd say we're 2B and some trying to be 3B.
Yes, I agree.
So here, between 1B and 2B, but more 1B.
Okay.
I'm from Romania.
From India?
Romania.
Sorry, Romania, yeah.
I think the budget should be 2B and for the future 3.
Okay. Sorry, which country? Estonia, okay, yeah. 1A, okay.
I'm from Lithuania. I'm not sure. It might be either 2B or 3B.
At this moment? Can we?
I'm from Lithuania as well. So in our laws, it says that we should have 4C, but I say yes, but it's working like 1A.
Okay.
Of course, now in this year progress.
Yes.
For some years.
In the year 2000, there were reforms initiated to move to program budgeting.
But
it's not working yet.
Okay. Well, eternity is the ambition, sir. Yes, for all of us. Yes. Thank you. Netherlands next.
Hungary.
Okay. 1A Hungary next.
Which were from Spain.
Spain. Okay. 2B.
I think they write every time, and we have even a PPBS, but normative value.
Okay, thank you. Next.
I'm from Germany, and I guess it's 1A.
I agree. Yes. Okay, so you agree with? Yes, but local government is always a bit different, of course. Do you participate too? Yes.
Oh, yes. I may misinterpret the system, but from a Canadian perspective, I would go with 3A. An incremental budget, performance-based over a period of 10 years, mostly because the finance ministers were the same from 1993 to 2003. And it's a very specific agenda.
Yes.
The basis for a 10-year period.
The problem in Canada is that they have so many specific agendas that sometimes they're a bit conflicting. And the PRAS, the Performance and Results Accountability System, PRAS, is the information architecture they use. And now they are about to change it again. They are revamping the PRAS system to make it fit with the accounting system. But their ambition actually is here, whereas in reality, depending on which ministry, there will be more here actually. So there's the reason why they are probably not incremental, they are not incremental, is the saving strategy. Canada was forced to several saving strategies that they were the program evaluation from the early 1990s resulted ultimately in zero-based activities inside there.
I'm actually a report argument from one perspective. The current Prime Minister has been the finance minister for 10 years. He seems to have advocated a policy of steady change towards given goals, steady surpluses, incremental change, paring back programs, that sort of thing.
Well, what they did in Canada was the huge surpluses they had, they diverted them to special funds, which escaped from the parliamentary control. But that's another debate. Yes, the numbers are significant. Lithuania, and do you agree? Well, you said actually yes. You answered already. Yes, yes. Thank you. Italy.
Yeah, for Italy, central government is at the level of 1A, but there are some attempts to implement some activity by
Thank you. I agree. Yes.
Poland, 1A.
Okay. Yes. I've never seen a Polish budget, but yeah. Okay.
Belgium, well, we think 3B as a goal, as a target, but one element of 1A still prevalent.
It's officially called a program budget, but if you look into the details, of course, it's here. It's at this level. So you see, I think it's an important exercise, because why is it an important exercise? First of all, you need a kind of frame to analyze something. So that's an analytical frame. The question is, do we use the correct analytical framework? That's an element derived from theory and modeling. You have to design a framework. Second, you have to observe reality and try to locate a country in a frame. That's the mapping exercise. It's not easy to map. Some people were confused. Some said, well, in that case this, in that case that, or perhaps ministry agency or local government is different. And so the mapping itself requires a kind of special focus on observations. How do you observe things? And the third is a normative position, of course. It's an exercise in normative positioning. What would be an optimal position? I think in general most of you said, well, we are about here somewhere. Is it the case that this position is better? And why? That's a very important question from a theoretical point of view, from an empirical point of view, a practical point of view, being naive or not naive, from a tactical strategic point of view too. Why would you make this effort to move to this position here? And this position, I'm just talking here about performance-based budgets. I could have added even a kind of additional complication because these are cash-based budgets. Actually, there's a third dimension on accrual-based budget, a shift from a cash-based budget to an accrual-based budget. That complicates things even more. I'm against an accrual-based budget, so I take a clear position there.
May I make a remark?
Yes.
So, in my view, governments every year do usually what they have done during the previous year. So the citizens are getting used to some volume of public services and their quality and quantity. And in my view, you don't need to measure every year the performance of each service and each government agency. In my view, you can define some areas, let me say level of criminality in the city, New York, for instance. And there you should implement 3B. Otherwise, for me, it is good to implement 1A, and only, again, according to the median voter theory in politics, you should define some activities in which you need better performance according to your voters want, and there to implement that performance-oriented budget. And that way, the members of parliament won't be confused because they would know what to focus. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, you just overflow them with the information, and it's not use of that.
I agree with what you say. I think it's even technically impossible to do it. You need. It's also. There is also a cost effectiveness of information systems. So if you would move, and that's one of the reasons why this collapsed too. It collapsed for several reasons, but one was that it was a very expensive system. I mean, you could not afford to do it every year, and there are other reasons too. I'm not going to the details where it collapsed, but there is sufficient analysis on that. And of course the question is, if this failed, why would this succeed? Assuming that we want it, why would it succeed? What are the reasons that this would succeed if we know that this failed? Of course it's less ambitious, so that's already one plus, you could say. But you should know that for the Australian budget, it's a 100% coverage. So it's not some departments that use it and others don't. So it's a 100% coverage. GEPRA too has a 100% ambition, ultimately. So you can't have it an ambition. So they don't do it, but that's a different. You disagree?
I turn in GEPRA numbers all the time and they're never used.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. But they are interesting texts. You can download them from the websites too. I invite you to look at the GEPRA documents. So that's an element. Why would you want to go there, and would it be functional? Under what conditions would it work? And then it's true, so not just a naive position, but sometimes we said once, well, input budgets are interesting, incremental input budgets, under circumstances of tremendous political pressure. If we are the government and we have to make 10% savings, it's a classical example. I mean, this is not fictitious. And I'm the Prime Minister, of course. And the Minister of Finance is next to me. So, it's easier to say, everybody, all portfolios, minus 10%. And then health would say, yes, but, and education, minus 10%. Cost effective, reallocation fit that purpose. So the purpose was to make savings and reallocate, see where the factors were cut, and demonstrate increase in performance. And therefore, of course, you need a performance-based budget, or a cost accounting system and a performance audit. And accountability. The capacity, and therefore you have to create a transparent system. People have to, in a contradictory discussion, that's why you need internal and external audit at the same level, to say, yes, economy has improved, yes, efficiency has improved, yes, effectiveness has improved, and be accountable for that. Or no, because of that. You could say, well, we tried, but it didn't work, the circumstances changed, there is a war, there is this, there is that, there is an accident. Accountability is important. Accountability for the budget to, government vis-à-vis parliament, an agency vis-à-vis the ministry, the public sector vis-à-vis the population, with the audits. Audits are public. The capacity to demonstrate that one works properly is important for the quality of the democracies and to refine these democracies. I think that was also one of the elements for reform. Try to improve our systems ultimately. And the crucial question is, how can the reform of the financial systems, which are not a monopoly of the financial people, I hope I could convince you of that, financial systems are not a monopoly of the finance people anymore. Because of the reforms, they become part of the line departments. And that's why I insist also on you, at least touch a budget. Perhaps from a safe distance, but at least try to look at the budget. It's so crucial to understand the functioning of a system. I think I'll stop here. Are there any last questions? So what I did was try to give you some elements of what is changing in reality. I tried to give you some frameworks to describe it. These frameworks, of course, are depending on some theories and models which are behind it. There are public administration models which I used here. And then I tried to push you towards a kind of benchmarking for your own country. What is the reality now? And perhaps a reflection of, would it be wise to change our positions? And of course, the ultimate question is, if yes, how do you move from A to B? How do you organize this? It's not an obvious thing. Actually, this is the reform process itself. But you can read about this also in the chapter 4, which I photocopied of the Public Management Reform book, which I co-authored.